I'm doing first Chaeronea. Again, I keep calling it Chaeronea. Someone in the last video suggested it was pronounced more like Chaeronea, and they could well be correct. So first Chaeronea here, the Macedonians against the Greeks, and I've done the Greek first turn and they've done exactly what they did in the last first turn, and now what I'm doing is playing it again to try and find a sequence of or a battle plan for the Macedonians that works better than what they did last time. So what we discovered last time was that I think Philip advancing up into here, giving these guys first shot and trying to fight out of these marsh uphill was a terrible idea, and that advancing our light infantry up and giving guys on a hill first strike to come down and wipe us out was a bad idea. And those two bad ideas compounded, what they meant was that we didn't have any reserves to contest the centre when our centre lost its, the Macedonian centre lost its battle with the Greek centre. By then we were committed all along the line and weren't able to react. And the only decisive victory we had was Alexander's attack into the Greek heavy cavalry. So learning from that, I think we want to refuse our right flank, or just turn our light infantry to face any aggression from the enemy light infantry, keep Philip where he is, and if the Greeks want to come down and fight out of the river, along the river line, then let them, and contest the centre, but with the backup of Philip having all his commands and bonuses there ready to intervene should there be trouble in the centre. And where we'll try and win the battle is here with Alexander on the left flank, hoping that he can pressure the Greek cavalry as he did last time, but then having not lost the battle on the rest of the battlefield, we'll hope that he can then turn and cause problems that the Greeks can't solve. So that's our battle plan, a more restrained idea this time round, to see if we can slowly work some advantages and make use of our leadership advantages better than we did last time round. I'm not going to do a blow by blow again with this. I've done this battle once. I'm probably just going to sort of see how it went at very key moments. I don't even think I'll do it turn by turn. I'll just come back and see whether this works any better, and if there are sort of key moments which show it going better or not. So here we go. End of turn 4 here. At first Chaeronea between the Greeks and the Macedonians, my second go at this scenario to see if I can do any better, and a completely different picture emerging. So Alexander has again totally polished off the Greek cavalry out here on the Macedonian left flank, the Greek right. But in the centre, the situation is not one of Macedonian collapse this time. It's pretty even or leaning Macedonian. So in here, everything is now spent from the Greek side, and they've just had a unit shattered. The army morale check kept everything in place, whereas there's still a fresh unit facing them on the opposite side. Here it's even worse. They've got 3 spent units and 2 fresh units, and haven't inflicted a single hit yet on the Macedonian phalanxes. And Philip is still there in reserve, and there's a standoff where they don't want to advance at him because they know they'll be at a significant disadvantage, and similarly they don't want to advance their light infantry off the hill because again they'll be at least at best evens, and they'll give the Macedonians the first attack, and potentially the opportunity, since there's nothing adjacent to Philip, potentially the opportunity for him just to swing round and smash them from the flank, and it would all probably end in disaster. So in the first battle, the Macedonians advanced themselves into a precarious position and then didn't have the resources to react when things went wrong on parts of the battlefield. Here the Greeks find the tables turned, and they don't have any moves to correct the problems that they've got. So they've got problems with their centre collapsing, and yet their cavalry's been routed, and the their backup force is kind of pinned in place, because if it tries to turn, then Philip can advance and take it in the flank, although they may have to do that. But they've not got a reserve to control the centre now. So unless they get really lucky and manage to win something here in the centre, they're starting to teeter. But there's still a way to go. We saw in the first battle that things start suddenly collapse and run away, and a good roll, and that if this area suddenly falls apart, then maybe they can alleviate the pressure in the centre. But the threat of Alexander with the cavalry coming in behind their lines is quite significant. Anyway, we're pushing on into turn 5. It's the Greeks' turn. I've got to knock their fighting value down, so I think they're down to 5 orders, and we're off and running again. It's the Macedonian turn 6 here at Chaeronea, and it's been teetering on the brink. You can see all the Macedonians are spent on all the way along this line, and they've actually had a phalanx unit shattered. All these are spent, and they've now had 3 units, 3 hoplites shattered and a shattered cavalry, so they've now got 4 shattered units, and that's a -1 on the army morale roll. So a unit just shattered in here, and the problem now is they've made their army morale roll. It's a 1. So they've got an army morale of 1, -1 for 4 shattered units, and that's a basic army morale of 0. And that's a problem, because if you now start checking the morale, they've got a base 0, heavy infantry, makes it +1, but then they're spent, and that puts all these guys on a morale of 0. A unit in there has been shattered, and they all rout. So that's them gone. Then if we come to this tile, they're on a base morale of 0. Their heavy infantry puts them on a 1, but they're all spent, puts them on a 0. The big problem they've got is they have enemy units in front of them and to their rear, and that's another -1. So they've got a morale of -1, and that means they all panic and they're all spent, so they all rout. That is the problem of having cavalry come round behind your army, is that when the collapse occurs, when the morale roll occurs, if it goes wrong, it goes very wrong indeed. And so that is the entire Macedonian centre cleared out, and these guys can now advance after combat into here. And with 1 command left, Philip can now come forward, just use his innate command ability to bring his forces now up to the holdout Greek units on this hill. Bring his light infantry in here. This costs no commands because he has an innate ability to issue 4 commands, and he's only using 2 to command this whole group. He could try and do something more flashy and sophisticated, but I don't really see it benefiting him much. He might just outthink himself, and then we'll use this 1 command to give this single unit an order to come up and confront these, so that they can't just swing easily onto our flank here. And yeah, that's us done. That is us done. So that was turn 6 of the Macedonians. They're closing in on the holdouts, unspent Greek units holding these 2 hills over in this far corner, and we'll see how much pain it causes to try and knock them off. But in this instance, we're going to have Alexander now able to swing back round and come in from this direction, Philip attacking from this direction, and of course we won't have the attack limit from here, so he'll be able to attack with all his cavalry and all his attack bonuses, while Philip attempts to pick them off from the front. So I don't fancy their chances of holding out very long, but they could dice the Macedonians for a bit. Anyway, that was turn 6. We're coming into turn 7, and I need to just rearrange the fighting values so I get the orders correct. But I think the Macedonians the Greeks are likely to be down to 2 or 3 orders tops. Turn 9 then here at Chaeronea. The Macedonian turn 9, and you can see all these spent units with the red flash in Philip's force. The average heavy infantry spent, veteran heavy infantry spent, but he's still got his troops and another veteran light infantry spent. Anyway, the Alexander came in from the flank, and a couple of turns of this, Philip attacking from the front with all his attack bonuses, and Alexander attacking from the flank with all his attack bonuses, and no limit, able to attack with all his units because there's no attack limit, halving of the attack limit because of the river. And yes, the final a unit in here finally got shattered. The Greeks had to make an army morale roll. It came up a 1, so their army morale is now 0 again, and that's all she wrote for the troops on the hill. And if I think about the light infantry, his army morale is 0, and he's not getting the +1. Not getting the +1 for being heavy infantry. No, he might just stick around, but with 1 unit left, the game is over, and all these have been routed. And the score's going to look very different from the last time round. And so this kind of just goes to show how small differences in your approach, or seemingly small differences in your approach, lead to very, very different outcomes in this scale of game. Just not moving in here and waiting for Alexander's attack on this flank to produce the outcome you think it's going to. It does. Then he sweeps round. You don't get unlucky in the centre and lose some big dice rolls, and therefore the dice rolls in the centre were slightly favoured the Macedonians, not massively, but they did favour them. And the combination of that, winning the cavalry, swinging around behind their troops, collapsing their centre, and all of a sudden you're just on a mopping up exercise, which did look a little bit dicey for a while when those troops on the hill started inflicting multiple hits on Philip's forces. I suddenly thought, as he walked back into a death trap, even though he should have the battle won. But this attack from the flank with the cavalry was just crippling. Even with the hill, Alexander was going in with +3 bonuses, and suddenly it was a very an average dice roll caused a hit, and a good dice roll caused 2, and it wasn't long before those troops were falling apart. So in this time round, the Macedonians have had lost some light infantry, shattered on the flank, and 1 phalanx shattered. Otherwise, convincingly held the field with the Greek forces routed. I'll tot up the points here and just come back very quickly. Well, here's a surprising thing on the outcome here at Chaeronea. The Greeks apparently won this, so that's a turn up for the books. As we found out before, the victory threshold is 18, and if we look down the points, the Greeks got 44 for withdrawn, spent, or routed units. They didn't manage to rout a single Macedonian unit, but they still get loads of points for spent units. So all these spent units all over the field, all these 5 here, they're just 3 points. all the spent units in here, 4 points for the veterans, they're all 3 points in there, 4 points for the veteran heavy cavalry. And so the fact that so much of the Macedonian army is spent, even though they weren't routed, that's their fighting value in points for causing units to be spent. 44 points for the Greeks there, 43 for the Macedonians. The Greeks didn't rout a single thing, whereas the Macedonians routed 14 units, and so ended up with 57 for routed. If we say withdrawn, spent, routed, it's 44 to 57. Shattered units, the Greeks scored 12 and the Macedonians scored 30. So that gives the Macedonians a score of 87. But that to 56, but this massive 42-point handicap for being so much lower on fighting value actually bumps the Greeks up to 98 in terms of doing better than expected. So they are, because of the handicapping system, 11 points better off, which means they've not scored a decisive victory by being driven from the field. But they have something around a clear game victory. According to the victory levels, this is a clear game victory for the Greeks, simply because of the extent of the damage they managed to inflict on this Macedonian army. So they've been driven from the field, but this handicapping system evens things up when it or balances things up when it comes to determining the winner of the game. Whether in this instance you feel that's plausible is open for a little bit of question, because that would mean that had none of these units been spent, let's say this entire force had remained unspent and were all completely fresh, that would have knocked 12 points off the Greek total, and then apparently this would have been a draw. And actually, in order to win, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure how the Macedonians then make a further 17 points in order to get the sort of decisive victory. So they would have needed not to have had any hits on these units either. That would have been another 15. And then let's say Alexander didn't take any hit on his, and that is what a decisive victory would have looked like. No hits on anything really, apart from a few hits on Philip's force, while the opponents are driven completely from the field. And if you can achieve that, then you've got a decisive victory. I would say the chances are vanishingly remote that you can do that. It does say, to be fair, it does say here in the rules that the handicap system makes it harder to gain large victory point margins in one-sided battles than in fairly evenly matched engagements where real battlefield victory could go either way. Hence, yes, that is definitely the case. I would say it is absolutely impossible for the Macedonians to score anything approaching a clear or major victory in this battle, because of they need to drive the entire Greek army from the field while essentially taking no losses whatsoever, or no hits whatsoever. Never mind losses, no hits at all. Just avoid, and you can't avoid being hit because the guys, someone just needs to roll a 9 and boom, you've taken a hit, 3 points. Thanks very much. So the scoring in this is somewhat, I think, open to to negotiation or interpretation. What we clearly saw here, though, in the second version was the Macedonian route to driving the Greeks from the field, and they've done it quite effectively, and very much in contrast with the first version of this battle that I played. And overall, despite my surprise at the scoring of this second playthrough, I think both of these have given me more pleasure and tension and enjoyment and decisions than the Great Battles of History version, which, as I started out by saying early on in this series, just didn't incentivize enough attacking play for either side enough to make it compelling. So I have really enjoyed this, and I'm wondering whether I do another one of these, because I remember talking about doing Gaugamela. So I think I'm going to set Gaugamela up and maybe have one or two goes at that over the coming days.